Then came in the room Wednesday when Cheryl was asleep with her nebulizer mask on getting a treatment. Said, we need to talk to you out in the hall. Didn't sound any better when I was in high school and somebody wanted you out in the hall. It was never going to be good. No good discussion ever has taken place out in the hall. And it was like, I guess they like to do it like ripping off a Band-Aid, give it to you quick. They said, we can't help with Cheryl's ability to swallow. She needs a feeding tube if she's going to survive. Cheryl said she didn't want a feeding tube. And she was having trouble kind of even going in and out of consciousness at that point. She seemed to be fading faster than anybody could believe. And they asked me, we had a DNR, do not resuscitate, and they asked me to reaffirm it. And you ever want to know the single hardest time in my life? There was two that are right up for grabs, and one was to say no. I don't want it to end like this. Feeding tube, go ahead. And I could have had her with me. And she would have stuck it out with me because she knew how it was going to be. But I promised when we got married I would protect her. And I failed a lot of the time because the laws did work well. But this time I wasn't going to fail her, and I told them no. And they told me what to expect, that she would waste away. That's a hell of a plan. I didn't know that. I didn't know it was just a matter of no food, liquids, and you watch somebody waste away. And I thought, my God, after all Cheryl's done for everybody, after all she's been through, this is how it's going to end? So here's the personal part. One morning when I walked back into the room at about 5 o'clock, I had to leave the room for a couple hours. I wasn't allowed to stay. I'd sleep in the day room. My mom would come in. She'd watch over her. I went in, as always, she was breathing rapidly. And, something went off in me. It was like a common phrase, it's in God's hands. And it echoed in my head, it's in God's hands now. And I felt a quiet rage building up. If it's in God's hands, and I'm not a real God-type person, but I'm spiritual, if it's in His hands, how could He let her end like this? After everything. We accepted everything. She accepted everything. She never complained. And this is it. So I walked over and I closed the door to a room that had company all that week, and her roommate was gone and we had no new roommates. Privacy, good thing. So I had a conversation. I wasn't too happy with God. It was just him and me and Cheryl. And I shut the door, and I will never forget exactly the words I had to say to him. I said, Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh. You gave us. We're so thankful. We've all benefited. And now it's time to taketh, and I can't do it, and nobody else can do it. You got to do it. You're God. That's half of what you're known for, and in a voice a lot louder than I'll use right now. I challenged him to not screw up on half of what he's known for. Help Cheryl and impress me while you're at it was my directive. I almost went deaf. It felt like I was going deaf. It was a silence I'd never experienced before. And a thought that, isn't it nice she's alone now at a time like this? Not a real voice, just a thought of my own. And I thought, yeah, it's nice that she's alone at a time like this. And I knew with no medical training that the process had begun. There was no indications. I had absolutely no doubt that the process had begun for Cheryl, that she wasn't going home, and that we weren't going to need hospice. Over the next 3 hours, I got to be with my wife and run over all the reasons I love her, told her, and not a person came in and out of the room. It was impossible in a hospital. And her breathing slowed until it was regular, and if I didn't know any better, if I hadn't had my talk with God, I'd have thought she was getting better. I'd have been happy. And then I'd been disappointed shortly after when her breathing became more shallow and more shallow. At the time, she had, as always, a shirt on the bed that she would wear in and then would take off when they gave you what you had to wear. It's a red shirt in white letters that said, "I am a medical marijuana user." And she always wore that in the hospital because she said that's where all the sick people and doctors and nurses are. That's who needs to hear it. And that shirt was with her then. And as her breathing slowed down and got more shallow, every 15 seconds she'd take a breath, and I thought that was it. And it wasn't. She'd take another, and I thought that was it. It went on forever. And then I realized, I asked out loud, why are you hanging on? It's time. And I realized she was hanging on because she didn't want to leave not just me, she didn't want to leave us. Because she was a help to us, and that's the one thing she knew. She did know how much she did. And I told her that it was all right, that she had to go, that I'd be okay, and we would all be okay. This is going to get done. And I'm not embellishing. I'm not saying it to make it sound like a movie ending, but she took one more breath and no more. And it wasn't done then. I could feel at that moment a love like I've never felt. And I couldn't tell if it was coming towards me or leaving me. It was just complete, unadulterated love filling that room. And then it faded and it was over. That phase. The reason I tell you this is it is the one thing that went right in Cheryl's life and in my life. For all we did and all none of you could do to help that knew us and all none of you can do to help now. I got the one wish I really needed. I got it to be a really good ending for Cheryl. So while we can mourn her passing, we can't mourn the way she passed. It was fitting. So I'd like to offer now one more moment of silence for Cheryl, for all the people that have died, waiting for everybody else to figure out what to do, and for all the people who are struggling, living with people that need help. And I'd appreciate it if we just reflect on it for just a few seconds, please. Thank everybody for being here.